PRAJNA SPARKS, a podcast where we listen to a Dharma teaching, contemplate through conversation and song, and engage in guided meditation. In this episode, we emerge from a pandemic with freshness, renewal, and aspiration.
While the last year of living in pandemic has been, of course, challenging around the world, I find the synchronicity of starting to move out of it during springtime fascinating. This time of freshness, new life, renewal, clarity, wonderful metaphor for ways that we can start moving forward and exploring life with some of the gravitas that this last year has given us. Of course, there's been an immense amount of pain and discomfort, living with a sense of insecurity, potentially isolation, incompleteness, a real inflexibility at times. For an entire year is very difficult. It's also a really good example of the distorted perception of samsara. The difference being that for the last year, we've been very conscious of that sense of inflexibility, of incompleteness, of discomfort, lack of fulfillment, of tightness, and being closed down. So yes, how wonderful that this spring of the quote new normal is happening right along the spring, at least in the northern hemisphere. I thought it might be good to think about ways that we could bring some freshness, lightness, openness, and aspiration to our lives using this background of the dense inflexibility of the last year. How do we do that? Look at, for example, questions of interdependence as a way of being very intelligent about how we interact with the world as we start to move forward. Really perceiving our experiences not as a fait accompli, something that's just presented to us as is in a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, but as a series of a constant flux of causes and conditions giving rise to results, which are also causes and come together with other conditions to give rise to other results and overlap one with another back and forth in a dynamic dance right before our eyes that each and every one of us interprets in our own particular way. We may all be experiencing the same phenomenon, but the subjectivity of our experience, the fact that one of those conditions is our own mind's interpretation of what's happening, makes experience completely different for each and every one of us, yet completely equal in being our own. So we can really use our intelligence in a way that's very aware, very open, and conscious of this as we move forward. Times of transition are really times of tenderness and sensitivity that we can really tap into as a way of going deeper. When I was coming out of 3-year meditation cloister, really felt like I had no skin after 3 years and almost 4 months of being in a single space without interaction with other individuals that weren't involved with the cloister and so forth. And it took quite a long time to readapt. In many ways, I never did readapt. But we hear a lot of that in the discussion of moving into a new space. It'll be a new normal. We won't go back to the way things are. I see this time as very similar. That sense of sensitivity and vulnerability that we move forward. We're a little bit maybe antsy or nervous about how to navigate this space in post-pandemic life, especially right now when things are in transition. Nothing is so secure right now that we can stake a bet on things being completely safe. And yet they're better than they have been over the last year. That intelligence we have to look at how things come together and display themselves to us and dissolve again and again and again leads us to this sense of how dreamlike, even illusion-like, reality is. Nothing like the last year to give a sense of how illusion-like reality is. So why not bring it forward? Why not take that learning we have had and actually use it not to perpetuate this sense of isolation and hoping that this will go away, but fearing that it won't, and so forth, but using it in a way that will bring more freshness, more openness, more lightness and aspiration into our life. To me, the key for how this works is the counterpart to intelligence, which I like to think of as innocence. There's a wonderful maxim in the Tibetan Buddhist practice of lojong, or mind training, which is often translated as be like a child of illusion. I like to think of it as being an illusionist, a magician or a wizard, a conjurer. There's a sense of both innocence and intelligence in the illusionist. The illusionist is conjuring up all these displays for the audience. To the audience seems like whatever it is that they're creating with their spells. The illusionist has enough knowledge to be aware that this is just a trick. They know how it works. But there's also that innocence, that sense of awe and of wonder at the same time of, wow, look at this. Look at everyone really falling into this magic spell. To me, that really hits the mark very well. I'd like to suggest the possibility of moving forward into our lives with this combination of intelligence that sees the causes and conditions and results coming together and falling apart and opening and overlapping in this magnificent dance, different for each and every one of us. And also this sense of innocence, of wonder, of awe, of openness and curiosity. Wow, what are all those causes and conditions going to do next? How are they going to come together? Maybe we interact with people whose approach to living in the pandemic or opening up into a new activity is different than ours. We can get resistant, go back down to that isolation, that closedness, that darkness, because this habit has been ingrained now for a year. It's a trick to get past that habit. This intelligent innocence can say, wow, what might be happening for that individual that has them perceive this situation so differently than mine? You're ready to lead with your heart, with curiosity, with compassion, and interest in another person, as opposed to immediately shutting down and being combative and creating all kinds of stories about the other individual that you really don't know. What this sense of intelligence and innocence does is it keeps us in that fresh potentiality of each moment, instead of falling back on habits, on storylines, on narratives, on getting triggered in our own personal history with all kinds of gunk. Instead, this intelligent innocence that's both identifying what we can of how things come together in this way, and also being in a state of wonder, curiosity, and interest about, why did it happen like this? Why is it different for me than somebody else? What might be happening next? That really gives us the opportunity to stay in the present moment instead of living everything out of our memories, living everything out of our habits, our fears, even our hopes. I'd love to see us use aspiration. Aspiration, to my mind, is very different than a hope. Hope, particularly in the Buddhist context, is often associated with expectations. We expect things to go great. How has that been working for us in the last year? We fear that they won't. Yep, that's what happened. Aspirations allow us to be fresh. Whatever is happening in that moment, we aspire to work with it to the best of our ability. We aspire to trust that whatever we can bring to the moment, in that moment, is good enough. It may not be perfect. It may not fix things, but it's enough to get us started. It's enough to get us to interface again with that intelligence and innocence of experiencing things from the perspective of them being dreamlike, illusion-like. We can try to use that to actually extend our reach, to have our perspective become a lot more broad, a lot more encompassing, a lot more gentle and kind to ourselves and to others.
Like a dream, like an illusion, like a city of Gandharva. That's how birth, and that's how living, that's how dying are taught to be. Like a dream, like an illusion, like a city of Gandharva. That's how birth, and that's how living, that's how dying are taught to be. Like a dream, like an illusion, like a city of Gandharva. That's how birth, and that's how living, that's how dying are taught to be.
I love your differentiation of hope and aspiration. I feel like a lot of people are so excited about, oh my gosh, we can go back to our lives and this is what that might look like, and thinking about how everything will happen out in the world. I think you're right. We don't necessarily know how things are going to happen out in the world, but I love the idea of aspiration as a way of setting our intentions for how we want to be as we're emerging into this new reality. How is it that people can go about setting those intentions and then remembering them as we are confronted with these situations?
That's a wonderful question because, we all have had the experience very likely of setting New Year's resolutions. And, by January 3rd, they're like dissolved and gone or something like that. Maybe not all of them, but we have some sense of what that's like. So yes, this could easily devolve into something like that. One of the best ways to do it is to incorporate it into something that we do on a daily basis. Maybe we have a meditation practice, or maybe we just wake up in the morning and have a cup of tea or coffee. And let those be moments where you call that aspiration to mind. Going back to those maxims from the Lojong, the mind training, there's one that says, start and end your day with 2 acts. The 2 acts are at the beginning to say, today I'm going to, and then that's your aspiration for the day. At the end of the day, there's a reflection. You look back at the day and you say, oh, where are the ways that I actually behaved in line with that aspiration? Where are the ways that I forgot about it? Where are the ways that I actually went against my aspiration? Not to beat yourself up. That in and of itself is against the aspiration. But in a sense, again, with that intelligence and innocence, that sense of really being intelligent, being precise and discerning ways that you did or didn't align, ways that you just forgot. And also the sense of innocence. Wow, how did that happen? I sat here with my coffee at 7:00 in the morning. By 8:00, when I got to work, the whole thing disappeared, even though I opened my day with that app. Of course, it doesn't happen right away, but instilling that habit of bracketing your day with a refreshed aspiration and the end of the day, a reflective review of how you did, taking lots of joy, not only in the ways that you aligned with your aspiration, but in recognizing the ways that you didn't. How wonderful that you did that. that's what's going to allow you to actually embody those aspirations and putting it out into the world more.
I feel like a lot of people are asking each other, oh, what have you learned? What do you want to take forward into your life? Asking each other in some ways about our intentions and about our reflections on the last year. It seems like that might be an opportunity for us to support each other in doing that as well. Like, it's wonderful to have an individual practice of being able to reflect and do that. But maybe as we're talking with people about how things are going as we emerge, we can say, what is it that you're wanting to be like in this, and how's that going, and is there any way I can support you?
As a point of questioning somebody, that sense of innocence again, of curiosity and wanting to know somebody and wanting to know more about them. But also it's a good way to respond to your previous question. Put out there on social media or in your immediate networks, hey guys, this is what my aspiration is. Can you check in with me? If you notice me losing track, can you remind me? Or even just the simple act of putting it out there for others to know is likely to keep us more aware that that is the space we want to be in. So yes, that's definitely something we can do on both ends, asking someone else, because now we are supporting them, naming our aspiration, of speaking it out is going to make it more embodied, something that we're now experiencing not just in our heads, but through sensory input, listening to our own voices, and also recognizing interconnection. So much of what we've learned, all of us throughout the last year, is just how social humans are, just how important our networks, our relationships, and not just in an abstract way, but in a concrete way, actually being with these people is, to the point that just looking at folks on the screen and hearing their voices was such a relief, such a comfort, such a joy. Yes, these are ways that we can take that nugget and start bringing it forward as we do emerge from this pandemic time to the transition, and support one another in very concrete ways as we do that.
I'm so glad you brought up interdependence, because that has been such an interesting aspect of this past year and thinking about moving forward. We have become very aware of, like you said, the importance of other people in our lives and how the disconnection from other people affects us. I think we're also really aware of where we are in conflict with other people, that the levels of comfort with different kinds of activities, with different levels of safety, have become so clear, and even sort of minor differences between people in terms of what they feel comfortable doing or not can really rub up against each other. And I'm thinking we'll be seeing that in this period of emerging also, that people are going to be doing this in different ways. And I think we can support each other, but I'm also very aware of the ways that we might be in conflict with or rub up against each other in that. So I don't know if you have any particular guidance for that.
That's always a tricky piece. Let's think about what conflict is from the lens of interdependence. It's different causes and conditions coming together for me and you, for example, in different ways. Let's say that we both disagree as to how we should move forward, what is safe and what isn't. Why is that happening? Is it that I'm stupid and you're brilliant, or the other way around? It's always a result of the particular causes and conditions that operate for me in this moment, yielding a particular result, and the same for you. So right there, we can start looking at that. What is conflict? We might experience something as conflict. Maybe everybody that you asked about the situation would agree with you. That doesn't change the fact that you have to work with it, respond to it, engage it in a way that's supportive and healthy for your mind, rather than continuing to perpetuate the conditions experienced as conflict. When we pull back and allow the fresh potentiality of the moment, the infinite possibilities to come forward, then perhaps we find a way of engaging the situation that doesn't feel as stressful, as difficult, as fractured. There's nothing inherent in the situation to require a single particular response. I could instead hear you and say, wow, can you tell me more about that? What is it that's happening for you that has you experience things in that way? I want to know more. So difference is not a basis for conflict. It's a basis for actually connecting more, actually learning more. But that happens when we live that aspiration of actually being aware of our interconnection and individuality. We are not either one or the other alone. We are always both and more.
That's so great. And it's definitely something that I have been encouraging in the work that I do about dialogue across political disagreement, coming to these conversations from a place of curiosity and really, truly wanting to know more, recognizing that we don't have the whole scope of understanding about everyone and everything, and actually drawing out other people to hear about their experiences, and also what I find very interesting, the meaning that different things hold for people. That as we do that, it not only helps us to have that connection with other people, but it actually helps us to understand everything more fully and complexly than we can understand just from our own minds.
We have a very educated society, and there's a real premium to the intelligence, the savviness. But we confuse intelligence and personal opinion all the time. Everybody who agrees with my opinion is intelligent. That's why this sense of innocence is so important. And I think you really hit it on the head when you just described that sense of curiosity with others. If you engage in curiosity only from the sense of intelligence as my opinion, it's a very flat, very sort of predetermined kind of conversation. Either you agree or you don't. If you enter into that with innocence, with the willingness to be vulnerable and to have your ideas challenged, not so much that you will disagree, but because maybe you think of yourself as a very calm person, and hearing somebody's descriptions, let's not pretend, sometimes hearing somebody's descriptions when they disagree with you is not the most pleasant experience. That's why that innocence allows it to be doable. The rigidity of an intelligence that's tied only to our individuality does not allow for us to experience ourselves as not just individuals, but also those in interaction with others, in interconnection with others. Innocence brings a softness and openness. That's that sense of dreamlike, illusion-like wonder that always has this question of, wow, how did this happen for this person? How did this happen for me? What are they teaching me? How are they being my teacher?
Let's go back to that piece about dreamlike, illusion-like. So how is that helpful to us in thinking about our lives or our experiences as a dream? I feel like I've heard that in a lot of different teachings or places within Buddhism. And so can you give us a little bit more kind of context for understanding that from a Buddhist perspective?
Yeah, that quickly gets into some intense philosophy around emptiness or shunyata, which I usually like to describe as infinite possibility. But let's start on the other end. Let's start in January and February of last year. We had a sense of life continuing in a particular way, indefinitely, as we expected, as we hoped it would, and feared it would not. There was this sense of things coming together in a particular way, and all of a sudden, bam, we hit a wall, all of us, at the same time. All of a sudden, we're woken up out of this idyllic dream. How did that experience come about? Again, causes and conditions and results, but also a measure of the flip side of innocence, which is ignorance. Not knowing and even ignoring the fact that causes and conditions don't necessarily always play out the way we want to. When we experience things, you can't pin them down. We couldn't pin down our way of life a little more than a year ago. There was no way to make it continue the way we wanted it to. You couldn't even identify. We've lived through this now for a year. If we ask ourselves, what was the one essential piece about life before the pandemic? The single indivisible quality that was lasting, identifiable, and independent of everything else. Nothing. There was nothing lasting about it because it ended. There was nothing identifiable about it because even now you can't put your finger on it. And there certainly wasn't anything independent about that quality of life. The mere appearance of a microscopic particle completely turned it on its head. That's true right now. It's true before the pandemic, and it'll be true indefinitely. We take things to exist in a fixed way, the way we perceive it. Even without viruses and pandemics around, that is never accurate. It's like a dream. When we dream, we're fighting lions or leaping across buildings or whatever it might be. That's not really accurate in what we think of objective reality. It's an example that we have within our everyday experience that gives us a taste, a flavor of the difference between what we think of as our everyday experience of reality and what Buddhism calls ultimate reality. So there's two pieces to that coin. Ultimate reality being shunyata, complete, infinite possibility, the possibility of things going towards pandemic or not. And at the same time, the interdependence of things coming together so that things appear to be a certain way. To put it as simply as possible, the dreamlike quality of experience is that there is always more to what we perceive than just what we perceive. There's always a lot more happening. There's always a sense of evanescence that we're not quite grasping the full extent of what we're experiencing, very much like in a dream where things are constantly slipping through our fingers.
Thank you. That's very helpful. The other thing that always strikes me about dreams is when we wake up from a dream, we might still be experiencing some of the feelings that we had from that dream, but we know it's a dream also. So we don't necessarily react to it in the same way. We can say, oh, okay, that was a dream. It's past, and I don't have to be so emotionally invested. I don't have to. And in fact, dreams we often can't recall in this sort of level of detail and specificity. And so maybe we don't grasp to the details of it so much. I think it's interesting if we sort of reflect on this past year in that way as a dream. I feel like we have experienced so much. I mean, there's just a level of collective trauma that we've been through with this pandemic. It's interesting to sort of reflect on that in a dreamlike way, to say, yes, we went through that and we experienced it, but maybe we don't have to stay stuck in some of those feelings and experiences that we've been having.
That's definitely a therapeutic thing to be doing right now, because a lot of us have been in difficult spaces over the last year. So many of us have lost loved ones or been through great illness ourselves, or even if we haven't, just the fear and the isolation and the sort of surreal quality of the last year of living in pandemic has had a lot of painful associations and impacts on us. There's definitely a therapeutic quality to looking at the past in that dreamlike sense, but I wouldn't want us to keep it only in the past. That dreamlike quality is present all along the time. It's not just now looking back. But even as we're dreaming, it's a dream. We may not notice until we wake up. Imagine the dream and you're dreaming. Lions, tigers, bears, oh my. You get to sit back and enjoy it. You get to sit back and say, wow, I wonder what those lions are going to do next. That's that quality that we want to bring not only to healing the past, which is a really valuable thing, but also keeping us nimble, keeping us flexible, keeping us open, light, and fresh right here and now, keeping us in the present moment of our aspirations instead of stuck in the memories and the stories that we tell about the past. That to me is more than healing, it's transforming. It's important to heal the past. But if we just keep living out of the memories of, oh my gosh, this last year has been so difficult for me, and that's the storyline that we bring into the future, we're not transforming. That's not to say that if we have very difficult past experiences, we're not experiencing things in the present as a result of that. In the case of trauma, connecting with infinite potentiality, shunyata, the fresh, knowing quality of our mind may open up portals for new ways to go forward by healing and also transforming.
As you're talking about taking a fresh approach, it makes me think about when we talk about refreshing a page in your browser. And refreshing a page, according to WikiHow, will cause it to update with the latest version of that page's information. You can also fix some site errors, such as the ones encountered when a page doesn't fully load by refreshing. I wonder if there's something of a metaphor in that, in terms of how we might be approaching life if we're not refreshing, that we're using an old version of our understanding of the world, and we have some errors in that. And so if we constantly refresh, then we can be more up to date with what really is present. So does that resonate at all in terms of when you're talking about a fresh approach?
Yes and no. It's a fairly good example within the realm of the way we handle things most of the time in the world. To recover something that we had before, or to bring it up to the latest and greatest version. It's not really about tapping an external body of knowledge, something out there somewhere that we frantically keep clicking a button to tap into. Rather, it's about learning how to accustom ourselves over a long period of time to tap into the bottomless well of knowing that is right within mind. It's mind's actual essence. This example actually kind of saps the energy. It gives that sense of freneticness. Whereas what activates energy, at least for me, is that sense of dropping ideas of past and future, letting go of anticipation of what might be coming, or the attachment to stories, even negative stories about what happened in the past, and allowing the fresh potentiality of each and every moment to open itself before us like a glorious dream.
I appreciate you sharing your experience of coming out of 3-year cloister and feeling like you had no skin, because I feel like we've been all having very different experiences. You know, not everybody's had the luxury of being more cloistered, being more separate from other people. Some people have really been thrust into much more dangerous situations, you know, that they didn't have so much control over. I feel like for myself, as I've been living by myself and keeping pretty isolated, and the idea of going out and actually interacting with other people is thrilling, but it's also a little scary. And so I'm wondering, in that feeling of having no skin, what did you do to help yourself to make that transition out of cloister?
It was definitely a time of exploring things in a very, I would say, embodied way. There's nothing like the feeling of having no skin to keep you in your body. I think that's really a special thing that we lose track of. A lot of times, as you're saying, we've gotten so used to socializing in the past, going to parties and events and lectures and school and work, that it just fades into the background. We don't really investigate what our moment-to-moment experience of any individual thing is. We go to work every day, so we don't question it. It's just work every day. But we're very different moment to moment, not to mention every day. Our experience is constantly evolving, all those causes and conditions changing, that flux, that dreamlike quality of what we are ourselves. What I found was that being very experiential about what was happening to me in a sense of embodiment. What was I feeling? How were my senses either too activated or not activated enough? What were the actual embodied experiences moment to moment for me? And really attending to those. Those were really able to anchor me into the moment to moment fluctuations as I moved from isolated, quiet, gentle in many ways, and challenging in many ways experience to back into what should have been the norm. I was very fortunate. We just came back into our own home. Many people leaving cloister have to have some kind of transitional living space. We were able to come directly into our own home, so that reduced part of that transition. Having a sense of my embodied experience and just recognizing how much my opinions, my perceptions, my habits were coloring that experience at the same time was really valuable. And that again taps into the sense of both intelligence and innocence at the same time. The body has a kind of intelligence that is kind of mute. It doesn't necessarily chat a lot about it. You have to tap in and listen to it with that sense of innocence and curiosity and discovery we've been talking about in a reflective sense, a sense of self-introspection, having all of that happening at once. That gives a sense again of that illusion-like quality, that magical play of like being in the middle of something and experiencing it at the same time that you're digesting that experience. It's really kind of wild. It does keep you in a sense of play, innocence, wonder. And it isn't always positive. Sometimes it can feel scary, but it always feels alive.
When the pandemic started, my life was very busy, very social.
You don't say.
Yes, I know. I know this is shocking. But I had a lot going on. I had a political campaign I was running out of my garage. I had a leadership role. I had a caregiving role. I had like so much going on in my life. Things quieted down so suddenly. And it opened up some possibility for me. And I remember it was just about a year ago that I got to attend one of your teachings, which I had never gotten to do before, but we could do that because you were doing it on Zoom. That led us to start this podcast. I also had the time and space and will to do my daily practice shockingly every day. And started some habits and started doing some things that I feel like were really good for me and good for my practice. And I can already tell that those habits will be mightily challenged now. Even just in the last 24 hours, I was like, okay, I'm going to start a cloister. Oh no, I've been invited to a party where everyone's vaccinated and we could actually hang out. And it would be the first time I could do that in over a year. No way am I not doing that. But how do I, manage that with my practices that I want to continue also? So I think that your experience of cloister is a helpful one in terms of guidance. You obviously had very intensive focus on your practices, and coming out of it, you probably didn't intend to maintain things at that level, I'm guessing. But just how can people think about if they've created some space for their practice within the time of the pandemic? How do we sort of think about how to make choices about what we do with it from here and to support that?
The Buddha teaches that the single most important meditation is meditation on impermanence. What we experienced last year, what I experienced at the end of cloister, is, to put it simply, a death. There was a sudden death, to use your words. All of a sudden, all of that just vanished. That's what it will be like at the end of this life. But from a Buddhist standpoint, there's more to death than the dying. It's not just the stuff that dies. It's the stuff that continues. The stuff that died last year in your life, for example, gave room, gave space for other things that didn't have as much air to breathe before. You were able to nourish that in a certain way because of the things that died. And now that bardo, that transition from the dying to a new place, to another new place, is starting. There is a rebirth of the habits, of the things that we grasp at, of the things that our hands are like already clenching. It's like even when the body dies, there's a clench that's still out there, waiting for something to grab onto. I very much experienced that coming out of cloister. I'm feeling it in a subtler sense now. One of the things that we can learn from the most is to look at what died, what continued, and what is starting to come up out of the depths. The Buddhist term for this is becoming. We are continually becoming, not just at the end of our life, which we call a death. There is a death, a becoming, and a rebirth every single moment. In every moment, there is that fresh, infinite potentiality that we can tap into and explore rather than continue to walk the wearied, worn, dilapidated paths of habit. What are those habits that are coming up and possibly yielding another death? The dying of the habits in this last year, some of which perhaps you don't want to die, some of which perhaps were nourishing and valuable to you. So I would say that the best way to encourage the things that you find valuable is to reflect on this process as a dying and now a new birth of just that habit energy, that clench. From a Buddhist standpoint, it's not so much that we die and then we just sort of beam up into a new life. It's that clench, that intangible clench. What is a clench going to do except look for a fist to make it happen? Look for a new physical birth. This is a wonderful time, as we are still in transition, to contemplate what has been valuable for you and to contemplate the habits that are starting to rear their heads and determine for yourself with that sense of intelligence and innocence, not being hard on yourself, but also not letting yourself off the hook without any reflection. Really examining what is helpful for you and what in those habits might be something that you can allow to pass. Something that is just mind saying, yeah, let's do more of this. Well, do you want to do more of this? Or are you just doing it because it's what you've always done? Bring that intelligence and that innocence to look at even these habits that come up in this new birth with a sense of freshness, openness, and aspiration. How much of this is actually lightening up your life? How much of it is, oh, I have to do that because that's who I am?
This has been Yeshe and Tania. Next, you'll hear Heather with a song, and then Zopa offering a guided meditation with Shivnee on Tibetan singing bowls. Thank you for listening. If you have questions, email us at sparks@prajnafire.com, Visit us on the web at prajnafire.com or follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Prajna Sparks. May all beings benefit.
Oh, life is like a dream if we approach it with curiosity. When we're in wonder of everything that we see, life is like a dream. Take heart. Hello again, renew. Hey, now we can hug again. Life is like a dream. Don't think that all your precious plans will come true. Aspire to discover everything anew. Life is like a dream. Take heart. Hello again, renew. Hey, now we can hug again. Ooh. Now as we all re-emerge, distracted from our true north, calm the urge, don't diverge. Remember, it's a rebirth. Oh, life is like a dream if we approach it with curiosity. If we're in wonder of everything that we see, life is like a dream. Take heart, take heart, take heart. Milam Jishin, la 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 la. Gyuma Jishin, la 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 la. Trise Jonkir, la 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 la. Jishin, ooh. Deshin Kedong, la 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 la. Deshin Nedong, la 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 la. Deshin Jikwao, la 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 la. Soon, ooh. Oh, life is like a dream if we approach it with curiosity. If we're in wonder of everything that we see, life is like a dream. Take heart. Hello again, renew. Hey, now we can hug again. Deshin Kedong, Deshin Lei, Deshin Duni, Shik Pasum. Oh, life is like a dream. Life is like a dream. Take heart, take heart, take heart. Dio, Dio, Milam Jishin, Dio, Dio. Gyuma Jishin, Dio Dio, Triza Jishin, take heart.
Hello, friends, and welcome. As Yeshe mentioned during the talk, the mind training practice of bracketing the day with an aspiration at the beginning and reflective view at the end is an excellent practice. It's also one we can apply when we sit down to meditate. So I thought we'd begin our meditation session with that same practice. Let's just begin by bringing focus to our intention for the practice, not only making it very clear, but also slowing down and sitting in the experience of it. For example, I'm going to begin my intention by acknowledging my wish to be more skillful, loving, and present in my life. And I recognize that in order to do that, there is the necessity of having the capacity to focus without distraction. So for this meditation, I will remain with the meditation object or the investigation, remedying any distraction whatsoever as soon as it arises. Moving into the meditation itself, let's turn our attention to the freshness of this present moment. We can rest our attention vividly on our embodied experience, taking whatever it is in this moment as the focal referent for our meditation. Maybe that's the feel of the seat beneath my thighs, or the feel of the breath in the lungs, or the tangible quality of whatever your present emotional state is. Whatever it is in your immediate embodied experience that draws your attention, turn your mind to that, keeping it vivid without falling into distraction, agitation, or dullness, maintaining that sweet balance of lucidity and calm groundedness. We'll practice like this together for a minute or two, but I really encourage you to pause the meditation here and take whatever time you can to practice in that way, remaining fully present with your embodied experience. In this space of stillness and lucidity, turn your mind to an examination of what you would like to invite into your life at this moment of renewal and emergence. We have the capacity to consciously shape and create our experience. Not 100% control in this moment, but rather recognizing that our actions and attitudes and view all have effects that we experience, and that we can work with all of these. Understanding that, turn your attention to your habits, physical and mental, and investigate them. Choose them one by one to look into. Are they serving you well? Do you genuinely want to do more of this? Is this something you do consciously? Is this habit serving your higher good? At any point that you get clarity, insight, and opening, drop the inquiry and rest one-pointedly in that experience until it fades, and then return to the investigation. Pause the recording here and practice in this way. Drop into the freshness, the uniqueness of this moment. There is nothing you need to attain, not a mold to fit yourself into, nothing else you need to be. Just be curious and attentive. Get familiar with clear knowing of this present moment. As we bring our practice to a close, pay attention to your heart and share whatever goodness has come of this with all others, all those beings that are looking and hoping and striving to emerge into happiness. Take a moment to feel that warmth and goodness, that affection, common humanity with all these beings. Sending out whatever good nuggets have come from this practice that you've engaged in. Finally, let's just take a moment to review with kind curiosity and without judgment how the intention we set at the beginning of the practice went. And, if it feels appropriate, we can set a new intention for ourselves for when we rise up from our meditation seat. Let's engage life with this positive, affirming approach where we start to see things as dreamlike, like an illusion that frees us up to see the potentiality of each moment, the freshness where we can be fully engaged without reifying and fixating. So let's go about our days just like this. Thank you. Thank you for your practice.